We begin this hour with President Trump supporting efforts to improve background checks for gun purchases. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says the president spoke with Republican Senator John Cornyn and Democratic Senator Chris Murphy on Friday about their bipartisan legislation. It focuses on ensuring federal and state authorities accurately report relevant criminal history records.
Now, the White House says discussions are ongoing and revisions are being considered, but the president supports efforts to improve the background check system. This comes as CBS News has learned the suspected Florida school shooter, Nicholas Cruz, bought 7 rifles in the last year.
Niall Stanage is a White House columnist for The Hill who has been following these developments, and he joins us now. Good to see you, Niall.
And you?
So, will the president's support of improving background checks actually translate into any real actions from the Republican majority Congress?
I am skeptical, quite honestly. Now, never say never, but obviously there have been pushes made previously for tighter gun laws, and they haven't really amounted to very much. That has been the case for a long time in Congress. This has been an issue that has not really seen any great movement. And so a statement like this, yes, it's a statement of support, but it's fairly vague, really. We don't actually know, as you noted, Vladimir, the actual final shape of the legislation. So all of that, I think, makes me skeptical.
Yeah, you know, often the argument we hear is that there are already laws on the books, and if people just sort of apply those laws appropriately, and we do have pretty good background check systems in place, but clearly there are loopholes. So the president was tweeting this weekend, and one of the things he did was blame the Democrats for not passing gun control legislation. It almost seems like the Dems are sort of his go-to blame for pretty much everything. I mean, if you were around over the past few years during the past administration, you know that President Obama was very vocal about his desire to pass gun control legislation. And it didn't happen in part because he had a Republican Congress.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there is certainly there are Democrats who are resistant to gun control, but the greater resistance is on the part of the Republican Party. That has been the case for a long time. An organization like the NRA devotes more money to Republican candidates and Republican office holders than to Democrats. So to say Democrats didn't get it done is a bit of a stretch, given that it is Republicans who have formed the most unified resistance to tightening the gun laws.
All right, Niall, let's switch gears to the Russia investigation. As you know, the president had a historic tweet storm this weekend. He attacked everybody from Oprah Winfrey to the Democrats. You know, this reaction from the president to the latest round of indictments, how do you think that this will impact his administration and also his legislative agenda moving forward, if any?
The most obvious thing to draw from it, I think, is the extent to which the Russian indictments have clearly gotten under his skin. As you suggested, I mean, that was quite a Twitter rampage, even by the president's unorthodox standards. As far as his legislative agenda goes, every time he fires off these tweets, it distracts from that legislative agenda. It certainly frustrates Republicans in Congress, because, of course, what happens is Republican lawmakers now have to answer about whether they think the president is correct to criticise the FBI or whether he is correct to criticise Oprah Winfrey, rather than whether they would be, rather than focusing on the more legislative types of matters that are before them.
Yeah, really. You also wrote in your article, sort of highlighted the takeaways from the indictments. What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, one is the fact that even though there's no collusion pointed out in this indictment, I think the phrase "in this indictment" is important. Just to sort of move the story on, I did think it was interesting that Rod Rosenstein came out publicly making that announcement, sort of a display of independence from him. And briefly, Anne-Marie, it's interesting now, all the firestorm over the Nunes memo, so-called, earlier this month, now seems rather overblown, because clearly there were some people among the president's loyalists who hoped that memo would really undercut the Russia probe. To that extent, the Nunes memo has obviously failed.
I almost want to say what memo,
right.
And also the debate about the Democratic memo has just disappeared in a puff of smoke.
Because it was all politics, where this is real national security implications that are being, you know, that's what our intelligence agencies say. And I saw a striking graphic recently that just showed the number of intelligence agencies, the number number of people in the president's own cabinet, the director of national intelligence, General McMaster, Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, who have said on the record that they absolutely believe that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election. And then you have, on the other side of the column, the person who doesn't believe it is the president of the United States. And I know that the president may be conflating, or at least I'm guessing, because I don't have the actual information, because the president seems to be sometimes conflating collusion with the actual act of the Russians meddling in our election. Yeah. And I just sort of wonder, Niall, isn't the country still vulnerable? That's what our intelligence agencies chiefs say, because the president has refused to act because he doesn't believe it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that point is at risk of being overlooked sometimes, Vlad. The fact that he constantly negates the impact of Russian influence and Russian attempts to meddle, clearly, it seems to me, has a knock-on effect on the likelihood of the United States taking effective action to prevent such interference now or in the future. And I think that should concern people, irrespective of what their political allegiances are or what their ideological leanings are.
All right, Niall Stanage, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.